The story begins with Jur, the newly hired swordsman of an S-rank party called the Future Plan Lodgings, having an argument with the group's leader Godach. The fight started because of how Godach badly treats Kraa, the bag carrier of the group. Jur doesn't like it when someone treats a lower-rank comrade this badly, so despite Godach being the party's leader, Jur made sure to stand up for the girl. Just as expected, Godach was furious at how Jur was acting towards him. However, despite how furious he is, he tried to hold back his anger and not punch Jur right in the face, but this incident will surely take a toll on Jur as they go through the mission. After preparing everything they needed, they immediately head to the labyrinth, and on the way, Kraa thanked Jur for standing up for her. She even got all open with him and expressed how badly she wanted to learn how to be strong. Jur, who has managed to take down a dragon before, eventually shared some of his tips and even promised her that as soon as they got back from the mission, he is willing to train her in swordsmanship himself, making Kraa so happy. However, just 2 hours after they enter the labyrinth, Jur finds himself all alone in the middle of the most dangerous place in the country. With his eyeglasses shattered, Jur, who has a bad sense of direction, is now worried how he would escape this hellish place. Jur, being the team's swordsman, engaged with the monster first. However, to his surprise, there wasn't even a hint of logistical support from his group. Then moments later, Godach is seen preparing to unleash a deadly strike. But to Jur's shock, aside from the floor boss, he was also one of Godach's targets. Although the reason behind why Godach did this is still unclear to Jur, one thing is for sure, and that is he was betrayed by his own leader. Since he already had no time to avoid it, Jur ended up falling to the ground beneath his feet. To make things worse, the floor boss also fell with him. Confident that the other party members will help him, Jur calls out for help, but before he even knew it, everyone already left him behind. With his eyeglasses now cracked, Jur doesn't even know what to do next. Eventually, 3 months have already passed, and Jur surprisingly managed to survive the 100 days by himself. But now that he is starting to feel a little lonely, he has decided to finally make a move and find a way out. But before he can even start, he ends up stepping onto a trap. Upon opening his eyes after getting washed up by the gush of water released by the trap, he was surprised to see a girl standing in front of him. He was so in denial of it at first, thinking that this girl must be a monster of some kind. However, when a strong monster suddenly appears and the girl is still there, not showing any hint of threat, Jur finally believes she is a human. Realizing this, Jur immediately went into serious mode and used his secret sword arts technique called Moon Dream to slice the monster in half within seconds. After doing such a crazy move, he immediately rushes to the girl, looking so emotional since he never thought he'd ever see another human being ever again. After that rather unexpected turn of events for both her and Jur, the saint didn't even waste a minute and immediately checked on the now already flooded floor. Based on how it looks, the saint is certain that there's a groove on the floor, which is most likely a magic circle. Jur, being a swordsman, immediately informs the saint that he doesn't technically have any idea what she is talking about. Quite curious to know if she is trying to conquer the labyrinth, Jur went on to ask her about it immediately. As it turned out, the people of the church brought her here, and she ended up wandering these depths all by herself. So basically, this makes her exactly like Jur, stabbed in the back by his friends while fighting the floor boss. Although this is such a sad thing to think about, Jur was quite happy thinking that he was now with someone who shares the same experience as he does. However, to his surprise, the saint was quick to shut him down, stating that it's not the case at all. Based on how it looks, the saint is certain that she just triggered this teleportation trap, which she read about before in adventure novels. According to her, the holy knights did accompany her through the labyrinth and even escorted her to the 4th floor, which no one has ever gotten to before. Then, during this moment, the saint started to feel sluggish, and it appears she was the only one to step on the trap. Now that the saint has already mentioned she is with the holy knights, Jur finally realized that this girl is not an adventurer at all. Although unsure if she is allowed to tell Jur about it, but since there are only 2 of them here right now, the saint eventually told him the truth. According to her, they came here to investigate the labyrinth itself. Every one of the church leaders said they felt an ominous atmosphere descend upon this area about 3 months ago. However, despite literally staying here, Jur didn't even notice such a thing at all because of how busy he is, eating too much food for lunch. But kidding aside, since this girl is affiliated with the church, Jur immediately went on to ask her a broken request if she could use her sanitation magic to clean him up. It seems like the girl herself is also a bit reluctant to be the first to bring it up, but she did notice Jur does stink like the sludge from a drainage ditch. So without hesitation, she immediately made use of her magic, and within seconds, Jur looked fresher than he was before, to the point that he felt like he was a brand new person after so long. Now that the girl has finally taken a closer look at Jur's eyes, she was rather shocked to notice that they were cursed. This surprised Jur, since not all people can easily tell that his eyes were. Worried that Jur might think that she is prying too much, the girl immediately apologizes. Jur immediately assured her that it is not the case at all. In fact, he himself isn't even trying to hide it or anything. Plus, he also had an idea on how to break the curse, which made the saint feel a sense of relief. Jur also went to express that he is amazed at the saint's skill, making her all blush and flustered. But aside from Jur, the saint herself is quite impressed. Although Jur may look like just a normal adventurer, the saint was quite amazed at his skills, since the kind of crab monster he took care of a while ago is quite strong. But he just defeated it in only one strike, making the saint speculate that he might be far stronger than the holy knights. Hearing this, Jur gives all the credit to his sword, the only thing he relies on right now. As they were talking, two eel monsters appeared behind the saint. And before they could even attack her, Jur immediately stepped in and sliced them off, saving the saint just in time. Anyhow, Jur suggested that they can't simply settle down for a chat in the same location, and that they should move to the safer zone he has been using, which is just a short walk from where they are right now. Although Jur was so confident that he still knew the way back to his camp, despite getting swept away by the water a while ago, that was immediately proven wrong when it took them 5 hours to arrive at the camp. All that Jur can say right now is to say his apologies to the saint. As soon as they finally settle down, the saint formally introduces herself and asks Lily about the church. Since she is older than Jur, who is now 19, by about a year, Lily suggested that he could just call her Big Sis. Now that she has mentioned it, Jur eventually remembered the pecking order of their vertically structured society, where seniority is based on length of service, ordered by age, class, and hierarchy. So Jur immediately wonders if Lily wants him to speak more formally towards her. Lily was quick to tell her that it's not the case at all, since she likes this more, since the people around her are always so stuffy. Besides, she also wants to be frank with Jur, which is a little bit awkward on Jur's part. Now that they have already introduced themselves to one another, Jur decided to inform Lily about what happened to him. However, Lily was quick to tell him that there was no need to do that anymore, since she had already heard all about it before they entered the labyrinth. As it turned out, Kraa, who was outside the labyrinth when the Holy Knights and Lily were preparing to come inside, personally asked Lily to take care of Jur in case they ever came across him. Hearing this shocked Jur, as he had surely thought that he had been abandoned by everyone in the party. Besides, Jur even thought that if it had been him, he would have given up and assumed someone was dead already if they didn't return after 3 whole months, especially since this is the hardest labyrinth in the country. But despite all that, Kraa is still certain he is alive, making Jur feel a little touched. However, Lily quickly shattered his sentimental moment like a wrecking ball when she revealed that Kraa asked her to bring back even just Jur's bones. Although that was such a bummer to hear, Jur can't deny that it does make more sense, since anyone would definitely think that after he didn't come back for so long. Even so, just having a friend worrying about him, it's good enough for Jur. Lily then goes on to ask Jur why he is even in a place like this all alone. Although he is still quite unsure if their leader did it on purpose, Jur went on to tell Lily what happened. According to him, he was knocked down to the very bottom at first, but he ended up being attacked from both sides by the floor boss and a guy from the same party as he is. Since then, he has been walking around trying to find a way up. Even so, he never managed to find the original floor. As the day passed, his mind started to revert to a caveman's. And then, while gibbering to himself as he was walking undeterred, he was swept away by water, and that's when he saw Lily for the first time. Because of this, he is so thankful for Lily, since without her, he would have turned into a caveman because of loneliness. After hearing Jur's story, Lily went on to tell him that they should report about Godach as soon as they get back up. But back to the topic at hand, Jur went on to state that even though he started out on a lower floor, he should have made a fair amount of progress in getting back to the surface over the last 3 months. So they should be able to make it out of here eventually, which means they just need to keep climbing upwards. However, floor bosses are scattered everywhere, and Jur can seem to defeat this one in particular. As it turns out, Jur has already found the part that leads to the next floor. However, the only problem is that it is blocked by that thing. He has been stranded on this floor for a few days, and he can't seem to defeat this monster that is much stronger than him. Even though it has been days already, Jur cannot see any of the monster's weak points, so he can't penetrate it with his sword. So he thought that if he just tried to force his way through it by force, his sword would break. At this point, Jur just accepted the fact that he might be experienced enough to be able to defeat such a massive monster. He starts to feel a little disappointed at the fact that he is not that skilled just yet. That is why he decided just to train for the last little while, for him to be able to stand a chance against this monster. With that said, Lily suggested that they should go now since she is confident that she would be able to lend a hand to Jur during the fight. However, Jur looks rather worried since he is certain that his sword will get shattered in the process. So Lily made sure to give him a second swing as a bonus. On top of that, she also made sure to cast magic into Jur's sword, transforming it into a magic sword that is so incredibly strong it'll never break. Now this shocked Jur since you never thought that his sword would ever be cast by magic. Although he wouldn't say it became the strongest holy sword there is, it's more like a faux holy sword. Because of this, Jur now feels like he owes Lily a great depth of gratitude. After this, the group immediately heads to the chamber where the boss is, which Jur estimated to take them around 30 minutes of travel. But not so surprisingly, it actually took them 3 hours in total. Although they were still panting in exhaustion, the two didn't even waste a second and immediately went straight into the boss's chamber. As they got there, Jur is super excited to finally defeat this monster once and for all using his 8-sword technique. Even Lily was startled by the apocryphal nightmare of a monster they needed to fight. After a while, Jur did manage to do what they aimed to achieve and defeated the boss with just 1 blow. To Lily's surprise, the coating she put on Jur's sword was a bit weaker than expected. Jur quickly assured her that it's all right, in fact, it was such a shocker for him. This is the first time he has ever been able to use that thunderbolt technique well, since it is really not a technique without breaking his sword. Although Jur still ended up ruining his sword, he was still happy that he was able to confirm that Lily is no ordinary person. He thought that back then, too, but an enhancement spell of this level should be impossible for a lone adherent of the church to pull off. Although it is known that a priestess should be weaker than an archbishop or cardinal, this is the first time that Jur has ever met a person just as strong as those two. However, this even made Jur wonder more since becoming this strong at such a young age is difficult to do. Now that he thought about it, he remembered that Lily did mention she was older than 20 years. So if that was just the lower limit, then that would explain everything, since in reality, this woman in front of him may just have a cute, youthful voice and way of speaking. However, there is a chance that she is actually an old, seasoned woman who is skillful enough to cast such a spell. In fact, ordinarily, it'd be such a dumb idea that Jur immediately dismissed it. However, over the last 3 months, he has changed somewhat into a dummy. At any rate, since Jur doesn't have eyeglasses for him to see better, Lily asked him if he was wondering what kind of monster it was that he was actually fighting. Jur revealed that all that he can see is a blurry silhouette, so even now, he still hasn't figured it out. At first, it may seem like Lily also knows what kind of monster it is, but based on how she tried to guess it was a horse because it has 4 legs, it turns out that she is just an airhead like Jur as well. Since they managed to take down the boss on this floor, they are now ready to take on the next step and move to the upper floors. However, before doing so, Jur looks a little worried that Lily might think he is not leading her in the right direction. So before they even start, he goes on to tell her that if she thinks they are going the wrong way, it's always okay for her to let him know. But instead of making him feel worse than he already is, Lily made sure that Jur is assured that there is nothing to worry about at all. Just like that, the two eventually kept going forward despite the danger that might be waiting for them on the other side. With double the strength and double the vitality, these two were able to descend 50 floors in a month. So instead of moving upward, the two actually ended up going down, which means their adventure inside this labyrinth continues. As they kept descending, the two who didn't have an idea at all wondered why they hadn't made it to the surface just yet. To somehow hasten their travel time, Jur lets Lily sit on a cart while he pushes it forward. Although it obviously looks exhausting, Jur kept on insisting that it's actually not, since for him, this is just another type of training. Still thinking that they were ascending rather than descending, Lily was a bit shocked as she thought about how deep this labyrinth could be for them to still keep climbing up despite a month of trying. Now that Lily is blabbering all of this, Jur had a moment of silence before he finally acknowledged the fact that they might be really lost. He knows well that he did fall a fairly great distance when he was knocked down from the 3rd floor, but he doesn't even think it was this far, since there is no way he fell so far that he wouldn't be able to reach the surface after continuously climbing upward for 4 months. At this point, Jur starts to acknowledge the fact that perhaps they are simpletons plowing ahead at breakneck speeds on the completely wrong path. As Jur starts to panic, Lily looks oddly serious when he asks the young man if he is aware that there are 2 types of people with a poor sense of direction. The first one is those who continue down a genuinely wrong path, but for Lily, that's not them at all, making Jur wonder as to why she even thinks they are. So confidently, Lily then stated that the whole time they've been traveling, they've already selected their path based on their intuition. Even so, their opinions never got divided, not even for once, and Lily strongly believes that there's no way 2 people would consistently choose the wrong path at the same time. So for her, the chances of both of them having such a poor sense of direction would be so astronomically low, as it'd be practically impossible. Although this is so reassuring to hear, Jur is still doubting their choices and starting to think that they've already trampled all over. Lily then continued over, stating that the second type of person with a poor sense of direction is someone who is initially going the right way but becomes overwhelmed with anxiety partway through and intentionally veers off onto the wrong path. Hearing this, Jur is in no doubt that Lily is trying to call him out for acting all panicky. So, before Jur gets the wrong idea, Lily told him that most things will turn out okay in the end if he just sticks it out. But the chance that even if they stick it out and nothing comes of it, Lily is still optimistic and even said that if that were the case, they can always return to their original path and start all over again. After their serious heart-to-heart talk, something suddenly appeared, shocking both Lily and Jur. But instead of panicking, Jur immediately sliced the monster in half. On top of that, after hearing Lily's answer that has 25 good points, Jur immediately knew she was right. What would it be they accomplish now if they turned back? Since they've already passed through more than 120 floors, the only thing they could do now is move forward and see what's actually more to this labyrinth that even no S-rank parties from the outside ever saw. And with the resounding clatter of a shell, they threw away their doubts and continued onward. The path they selected will take them through a ravine untouched by light, leading them even deeper down, and so their adventure has still only begun. As their journey to the deeper levels began without any choice, the two ended up eating creatures they came across on their path to somehow regain energy. Although most of the food they end up catching tastes so bad for Lily, to the point that she's about to cry, but it's the other way around for Jur, who really finds this food so tasty. Although neither of them could even start a fire, ever since Lily showed up, the standards of living in the shelter have drastically improved, thanks to the clean water and her flawless sanitation magic. After eating their lunch, Lily went on to take a nap while Jur continued with his training. But before that, Jur thanked Lily again for her help. Since she came, Jur's life in this labyrinth got a lot easier. Without Lily's help, Jur was certain that he wouldn't have been able to defeat that horse floor boss. However, after realizing that it's getting tougher and tougher to beat the floor bosses in this area with his own power, Jur made sure to continue training until he felt it's enough power to beat a boss on his own without Lily's help. Lily then went on to tease him around, trying to make him feel guilty for saying that he doesn't want Lily's help the next time around. Scared that Lily might get the wrong idea, Jur immediately explains himself, stating that what he meant was that, as an adventurer, he doesn't really want to burden someone else and was just thinking about what he could do for Lily as well. Seeing him stutter a bit because of worrying that he might offend her, Lily immediately laughed it off, telling him that she was just kidding. Quite relieved after knowing that it was all a joke, Lily is starting to get off topic and right away asks Jur if he has ever been called cute before. Now that Lily has asked him that, Jur suddenly remembered that his master often told him he was not cute and was way too impertinent, which Lily sees as to why. Getting a bit awkward already, Jur then tells Lily that she should go to sleep already so that he can finally start his training. On his way to the place where he could train, Jur couldn't brush off the fact that Lily is sure to be a little troublesome sometimes. Despite all the teasing, Jur still couldn't deny the fact that he finds Lily cute. In fact, he even thinks that he might already be in love with her, and he can't even concentrate on his training because of that. Then suddenly, he remembered his master's words about him not getting himself involved with women. Since, as someone who has been divorced 5 times, Jur's master knows he is just so right. To be more precise, 5 years ago, when Jur's master told him that, he couldn't help but reply that he was just wrong in the head without even thinking. Because of that, his master made him work several times harder than usual after that. But now that he is in such a position, Jur slowly realized that his master's words somehow carried a certain weight to them. Jur has been avoiding getting close to women, but it is probably unavoidable this time around. He spent 3 months all by himself in this labyrinth without ever seeing the light of day, prowling around in that extremely filthy state until Lily, the good-natured woman, appeared in front of him. Since then, he has already spent a whole month alone with her. Then, as soon as he got careless, he couldn't help but start seriously considering how much he is beginning to like her, and Jur knows that he has never felt like this before at all. For the longest time, Jur had a guardian until 3 years ago when his master hurt his back fighting the poisonous dragon. During that time, his master told him that he should find an optician, as he would be going on a trip to a secluded hot spring. Since then, Jur has been traveling on his own already. Through every city he visited, most people treated him as his master's apprentice and would usually just ask him to duel. Although there was one girl with whom he developed a friendship, in the end, that too was just a story of sweat and tears. So to be exact, Jur never really had a chance to get to know someone before, until that chance has finally come this time around. Just thinking how cute and nice Lily is, Jur's heart beats faster all over again. Trying to calm himself out, he goes on to meditate, but despite his efforts, the only thing inside his mind right now is Lily. Although he really does want to tell her his true feelings, but Jur thought that it was a little unfair to tell her that under these circumstances. After all, no one else is around to help her if needed, and outside her barrier, it's teeming with monsters. In that kind of situation, it'd be easy to compel her to say yes or no, but Jur immediately thought that it would be the wrong thing to do. That is why he decided to do it above board. So the only time Jur planned on telling Lily about his feelings was as soon as they left this labyrinth and had exchanged letters for about a year. As he clears his head, deeply and deeply, Jur started spreading out the chakra that flows through his body until every part is full to the brim. He honed it so sharply and strongly, and when he thought he had already achieved deep focus, a silly thought abruptly interrupted his training. Thinking that Lily might actually already be 80 years old almost whacked Jur's thoughts. At the back of his head, the clergy's power peaks in their later years, so there is no way a young person like Lily could use holy magic so skillfully. Since if he were to think about it, he had only seen a fuzzy outline of her body, and that's to say nothing of her face, making him wonder how he even got the idea that Lily had such a great smile. On top of that, the only reason she holds his hands after eating is because she must cast her spell, and it's not because she has feelings for him, which also means Lily is just a cheerful, merry woman with cute mannerisms, soft hands, smells incredibly good, and is probably also 80 years old. Now that Jur has thought about it, he can't seem to brush off that thought from his head. Then, before he can even think about more, Lily suddenly appears behind him, shocking him to the core. Then all of a sudden, Lily went on to cast a spell on him that would prevent him from catching a cold and staying up all night. Before Lily leaves to sleep again, Jur asks her how she even used her magic without touching his hand. At that moment, Lily revealed that she doesn't technically need to touch him to use her magic since she has been training, leaving Jur speechless and even more confused, since if this is the case, why does Lily even touch his hands when casting the sanitation spell after they eat? Jur doesn't even know what to do next and what to expect since he doesn't really want to conclude just yet. And so, their adventure continues with Jur now having more questions than before. Meanwhile, back at the surface, Kraa managed to dream of Jur all of a sudden. It has now been 4 months since the incident happened, and since then, Kraa's daily life has remained unchanged. She hasn't really heard any news about those holy knights she met either. The thought that nothing has changed, as if nothing even happened, somehow haunts Kraa day and night. It is like a dream she only knows about. The wheel that is her daily life just keeps spinning. All that's changing is the season as fall comes to a close. Then, while she is training, she comes across Holland, who is keeping his kids company after they complained that they are getting a little fat recently. However, his kids aren't anywhere near the area since he unconsciously left them in the dust without even noticing. So for the meantime, he went on to wait for them on a bench while Kraa went ahead and started training again. While doing so, Holland notices that Kraa is now literally covered in sweat, making him wonder just how far she even ran. According to Kraa, she runs for at least an hour a day. She does 5 sets of 10 sprints of varying distances with turns included, so Holland suggested that she should do short-distance sprints as well. But for Kraa, that really depends on the day. Today, in particular, she plans on doing 10 uphill runs without any physical enhancements. Now this amazed Holland, since aside from Kraa's determination in doing this, her discipline is definitely top-notch as well. But before anything else, Holland also reminded her to be sure not to mess up her body. Though she can get most stuff healed if she goes to the church, even so, once something bad happens, it doesn't really matter how skilled one is, since the worst could still be the end. Then, all of a sudden, some church carriages passed by. Although this isn't the first time church adherents are used to getting up early in the morning, but Holland even noticed that everyone in the church is working hard lately, making Kraa speculate that they might have already found out about what happened in the labyrinth. Upon looking at the ornate carriages that aren't a common sight in this town, suddenly showing up continuously since last month, makes both Kraa and Holland worried that something bad is about to happen. Based on what Holland knows of holy knights, they don't usually take action unless it's for stuff like preventing the resurrection of the fallen king. Although he might just be overthinking, in any case, he just hopes it doesn't turn into trouble. As Kraa tried to ask Holland more about it, Holland's kids suddenly arrived, not giving her the chance to do so. But before leaving, Holland told her that he is confident Kraa will be a way better adventurer than him, at least as long as she continues with her training. Then that same night, one of the holy knights, Arllinit, went on to visit Kraa at her house, making Kraa wonder why Arllinit even wanted to talk to her. As it turned out, Arllinit wanted Kraa to tell her what happened, if there was anything to their party when they visited the labyrinth. This shocked Kraa since she wasn't really expecting that question at all. Although Arllinit did try to ask Godach about it, but the only thing he said was that the party has already given up on the raid. That is why she badly wanted to know what really happened inside that labyrinth that made them stop exploring it, and what could possibly cause a party that climbed all the way to S rank to throw in the towel that easily after only trying it once. Especially since they didn't lose even a single party member. After hearing Arllinit say that, Kraa almost sank into darkness, quite confused at what was going on. The fact that the party reported not even a single party member was missing made her wonder if there was a registration mistake of some sort. However, since that is likely not the case at all, then it only means that Jur was never really registered with the party in the first place. While Kraa is literally having a quiet breakdown, Arllinit herself kept on wondering what really happened. According to her, she'd pretty much understand if the party had suffered large-scale losses, but it just doesn't make sense to call off the whole raid after one offensive push. That is why Arllinit concluded that maybe the group has met with some trouble of unknown origin in the labyrinth, eventually pushing them to all fall back. Which is why Arllinit wants Kraa to tell her why Godach really gave up. While Arllinit is trying to make her speak, inside Kraa's mind, the answer is already clear. Godach probably didn't want to push through anymore because he already accomplished what he set out to do. Now that Arllinit has mentioned it, Kraa somehow concluded that maybe that wasn't just an unforeseen accident. Perhaps, from the very beginning, his only goal was to murder Jur. But Kraa does wonder, if that were the case, what was Godach's reason to end up with such a cruel plan, and why did he need to murder Jur in the first place? However, instead of turning Godach immediately over to the authorities, Kraa tried to act cool to avoid making Arllinit suspicious of her. Instead, she just went on to ask her as well regarding their troubling experience in the labyrinth for now, while laughing so awkwardly since Arllinit also mentioned that her team also came across some trouble of unknown origin during their raid. Because of this, Arllinit went on to inform Kraa that during their descent into the abyss, they lost track of one of the 4 saints among them, Lily Lee, after she got caught in a teleportation trap. Although it may sound like an excuse, but Arllinit is certain that there was something strange about that dungeon. Throughout the original exploration accompanied by the saint, they were more on guard than usual, avoided fighting whenever possible, and acted with extreme caution. Even so, that teleportation magic circle was so worn down it shouldn't have been able to function, and yet it activated only when the saint walked over it. Because of this, Arllinit speculated that the trap must have only been activated by a specific target. Aside from that, Kraa also heard that most traps and magic circles in dungeons are naturally occurring, so they aren't complex enough to be able to designate a specific target. Although Arllinit can deal with a failure, she just can't put up with a failure of unknown origin. That is why she strongly believes there's something in that labyrinth that no one knows of. After all, the investigation was ordered by the 4 saints themselves, which is why Arllinit badly wanted to know what happened to Kraa's party at all costs. She did ask the other members of Godach's party about the matter, but everyone's lips are sealed, making Arllinit wonder more why that man even gave up on the raid, and above all, who was the dead friend that Kraa mentioned to Lily before they entered the dungeon. At this point, Kraa had no more excuses since Arllinit pretty much got her cornered now. Recently, Kraa had a chance encounter with a beautiful person who is as beautiful as Arllinit. While peacefully eating her food in a restaurant alone, a girl suddenly went to talk with Kraa, asking to sit beside her. Then, unexpectedly, the girl goes on to ask Kraa for some suggestions on what the tastiest food in this restaurant is. Quite worried that she might end up pointing out a dish this girl would not like, so just to be safe, Kraa suggested some of the customer favorites she knows off. However, the girl turns out to be such a glutton since instead of buying just a normal portion of the food Kraa suggested, she ended up ordering the restaurant's special, which is known to bury reckless challengers before because of its massive portions. This dish is enough to satisfy even the hungriest customer. The owners created this meal specifically with the desire to leave people so full afterwards they'd feel like they are about to pop on their way home. It's the very essence of the owner's love and tenacity. So technically, if one person orders 2 helpings and then leaves anything on their plate, the owners will definitely be mad. But thankfully, the girl did manage to finish both serving in one meal, shocking everyone. After eating her food, she immediately excused herself as soon as she finished paying, while also telling Kraa that she shouldn't worry anymore since she'll settle things herself here on, quite leaving Kraa in deep confusion. Then, surprisingly, that same girl got to the labyrinth already and got to meet up with Lily and Jur. Since she came out of nowhere, the 2 who were just minding their business were shocked to see her. At this point, the girl finally introduces herself as Yunis and assures the 2 that she is not up to anything shady at all. So over the next hour, the 2 got to know Yunis more and vice versa. But above all, aside from seeing another human aside from themselves, Lily and Jur were so happy that Yunis actually knows how to put up a fire. The 2 who are now on the verge of going loco started talking in their own little made-up accent, jokingly stating that fires finally came to their little village. With all the talking they did and the coziness of the fire, the 2 suddenly went on to lie and are now preparing to go to sleep, leaving Yunis in a very awkward position. So to ensure the 2 are kept awake, Yunis continued yapping and told the 2 about Kraa and Arllinit. Now this intrigued both as they immediately sat down as soon as they heard their comrades' names. As they start to rush Yunis with questions, Yunis goes on to formally introduce herself again, stating that she is Archmage of the Stars, which is a 1-person search party. After hearing that Yunis is an Archmage, Lily suddenly remembered that Yunis is actually famous for being the youngest registered Archmage in history, which shocked Jur a bit. So, given that they are all close in age, she thought they'd be more aware of each other. First is the great slayer of the toxic dragon, Jur and island-saving saint, Lily Lee. Based on how the two reacted, Yunis realized that they must not have known that information about each other, despite working together for so long, which made Yunis wonder just what in the world these two have been doing all this time. With a serious tone and look, Jur goes on to state that they have been just catching fish, drinking tasty water, thumb wrestling, and many more. Although this is such an odd thing to do, especially since they are now hundreds or maybe thousands of feet beneath the ground, Yunis is a total weirdo for seeing those things as something that is fun to do. But kidding aside, Jur was a little curious as to how Yunis even got all the way down here, finding their exact location. Yunis then states that it was easier for her to do than the two, revealing that she made use of the magic circle, which teleported Saint Lily from the 4th floor, and then followed her trail. As Lily got all amazed at how Yunis did all these things, Yunis cut her off and told the two that she should be the one who should be amazed, since it is pretty courageous for the two to delve to these depths and still manage to survive. Thinking that these two are doing all of this on purpose, Yunis starts complimenting them for their skills and determination. Now that Yunis has already mentioned it, Jur couldn't help but shout his frustration out now that he has already confirmed that they were indeed descending and is continually still doing so. Jur also tried to pin the fault on Lily, who listens to him all the time. But when Lily told him that everyone should take responsibility for their actions, Jur almost passed out due to frustration. After all, he was the one who started going in the wrong direction in the first place, so although he and Lily share equal responsibility for when they traveled together, everything prior to that was all his fault. So if Lily decides to point that out, Jur knows that he has to grovel on his knees. But now that Yunis is here, they are hoping that they might actually get rescued already. Although that was supposedly to be the case, however, Yunis only assumed that the two would come across a floor boss on a higher level where they had a disadvantage. As a result, they are now simply stranded here, all three of them, as Yunis didn't really expect to find them both so deep down. Because of this, Yunis actually concluded that these two might have been planning to conquer the dungeon on their own. Hearing this almost made Jur cry, since that was not the case at all. Now teary-eyed, he goes on to reveal that they simply have poor senses of direction, and added that they were actually trying to climb out this whole time. But instead, they kept going deeper and deeper. Now this sounds like an interesting coincidence for Yunis, which gave Jur a bad feeling all of a sudden. Before expressing her thoughts, Yunis first asks the two if they know anything about her. Lily was quick to answer that, based on what she remembered, aside from being the youngest archmage in history, Yunis also created a new kind of magic. Strictly speaking, there are a few specific requirements for something to be considered new magic. To put it simply, her magic draws power from the stars. That said, she is one of the people who hold the title of Archmage. So even in a place like this, where the light of the stars doesn't reach, she can still use that power to some extent, or at least should be able to. At this point, Jur's heart is already pounding like crazy and is now about to burst. As Yunis continued talking, revealing that a place like this reduces her power by 80%, which simply means she is completely useless at this point. Now this shattered every inch of hope that's left inside Jur. At this point, the swordsman and the clergy, with a poor sense of direction, together with a new mage, are now about to tackle an adventure together into the depths of the dungeon once again. Now that there's a new addition to their group, Jur went ahead and told Yunis that he and Lily had actually been stranded on this floor for the last 3 weeks already. Although they tried everything they could, the massive door that leads to the next floor is not opening at all despite Jur's efforts. But one thing is for sure, he knows that there is something like a magic circle carved into the surface of that door, but he can't somehow see it clearly because it's solid black. Since Yunis is a mage, the two are hoping that she'd be able to transcribe it for them. Using one of her spells, Yunis generated some water to fill the depressions on the surface of the door, then pressed it against the ground, making sure the shape remained unchanged, just like how one would change a book. As Yunis went on to check on it, she was shocked by what she discovered. But what's more shocking is the fact that even Lily has an idea of what this magic is. It turns out that it's actually an apocryphal magic circle and an apocryphal beast, which simply means this labyrinth was likely built by someone linked to the fallen king. It is known that the Rasti religion has scriptures separate from the canonical scriptures called Apocrypha. What is written in the Apocrypha is not intended for moralistic teachings, nor is it a completely narrative tale. It details the story of one who existed long ago, which is the fallen king, also known as the Great Enemy, who sought to destroy God and the world, and his fierce battle with the apostle of God, Rasti. So to summarize, both Lily and Jur indeed have an awful sense of direction. For the last 4.5 months, the two have been meandering in the labyrinth, going against the wind, and during that time, they've also defeated several floor bosses, which means those bosses were technically apocryphal beasts. They are known to be the beasts that the fallen king used during his battle with Rasti. Some theories suggest they were actually a part of the fallen king. It is said that those beasts were so fearsomely strong that it took an entire army to defeat just one, and that one of the greater beasts could rival a whole country in power. However, hearing all of this seems like an exaggeration for Jur. Noticing that Jur is not believing any of this, Lily goes on to finally tell him that the horse he cut down back in the upper floors was called a nightmare, and that creature is just known as a lesser beast. But if anything of this is true, Jur is wondering why there are apocryphal beasts here anyway, to which Yunis answered that no one really knows why, considering everyone thought that they were destroyed by the apostle Rasti a long time ago. At the very least, the rumors about some surviving beasts and the fallen king creating this labyrinth might be true after all. But no matter what the case is, there are definitely some lingering traces here and there. Aside from that, the magic circle etched into this door is also mentioned in the Apocrypha. But that's actually a holy magic that is in use based on Lily's observation, since she has seen it a few times before already. Based on the information they have gathered today, it is pretty obvious that this is the magic circle used by Rasti before. It was recorded in only the original and the first 7 copies of the Apocrypha. In her diary, Rasti expressed discomfort with people calling her apostle. But this magic circle is not exactly the same, since this isn't a normal protective spell at all. As Lily takes a closer look at it, this circle doesn't just keep outsiders from getting in, as it also keeps whatever's inside from getting out. So either way, for Jur, if it is a spell that Rasti did indeed cast, then he thinks they shouldn't break it at all. However, Yunis actually thinks otherwise. She is certain that there must be some sort of key to breaking this spell, to which Lily also agrees. Yunis then added that although they are not sure if Rasti is really a person, but she is certain that she should have been able to construct a perfect magic circle. Despite this magic circle being so complex and sophisticated, it has been constructed in a way that would still allow it to be broken by a holy magic user of a certain level and a magic analyst. Which gave the girls a hint that this is a spell that is meant to be broken. Since this labyrinth is connected to the fallen king, it has now become a checkpoint that can be traversed by Rasti herself, by some other holy magic users, or by people who are not subordinate to the fallen king. As Yunis tried to tell them what it means, only for her to say she has no idea what it is in the end, Jur just lost hope with these two. At this point, Jur is about to walk out, tired of hearing any of the girls' unserious conversation. Yunis immediately stops him, with Lily clearing it out that Yunis was just joking. But kidding aside, Lily does think Yunis has a point, that maybe they just don't have enough clues yet. Now that Lily has mentioned it, Yunis thought that maybe Jur's adventurer knowledge might help them navigate the labyrinth even more. However, Jur was immediately dejected since he didn't even know a thing about this place. Although he was initially part of Godach's S-rank party, he was actually just an outside hire, which means he isn't really registered as an adventurer yet. Hearing this really infuriates Jur, since this means that, since he entered a restricted area without registration, he'll probably end up getting detained and fined once he steps out of this place. But truthfully, even for Yunis, Godach's real intention is indeed a mystery. Based on how the events have turned out, Lily is certain that Godach was too well prepared for it to be called only an accident. It's like he was planning to do something to Jur from the very beginning. Now that Lily has mentioned it, Yunis goes on to ask Jur if he has any idea why Godach would go to this extent just to get rid of him. However, even Jur has no idea as to why, since he doesn't even remember doing something that make Godach lie to him. But no matter what angle they look at it, for Jur, the greatest swordsman of their era, is just too significant a piece to have been involved in this matter by accident. Since the three couldn't find any answer, Yunis suggested that they should just go through this door and maybe find what they are looking for on the other side. Although Jur never really thought of that now, But since the real reason why he came into this labyrinth was to conquer it without hesitation, he immediately said yes. Despite that, Lily is a bit reluctant, just thinking that this may delay them from getting back to the surface. So Yunis assured her that there is nothing to worry about, since she already informed Arllinit that she might take a while in rescuing them. Yunis also has a crazy idea that will take them to the surface faster, and that is to fight their way to the deepest floor and then return to the surface from there. After all, the core of the labyrinth's mass of mana is hidden on the deepest level, which means as a mage, Yunis could use that to cast a teleportation spell that will transport them back to the surface. Yunis really finds this labyrinth quite suspicious. On top of that, she has also been asked by the 3 old saints to investigate the interior of the labyrinth as well. Besides, Yunis also thinks that they'll probably never have another chance to gather and utilize the level of collective strength that's here now. Since they are now a 3-member group, they are hoping that things will be much easier. But aside from the orders of the old saints, Yunis also informed the 2 that there have been numerous ominous predictions made by the Magic Federation, which is why she also wants to investigate what's going on. But above all, after finding apocryphal beasts and apocryphal magic down here, Yunis can't help but feel like something big is about to happen. Since everyone has already agreed to Yunis's plan, their only problem now is who will guide their way. Since Jur doesn't want to take full responsibility of possibly guiding the girls in the wrong direction again, he came up with an idea where the 3 of them will go in different directions, then come back where they are standing right now, and whoever makes it back first will be their guide from now on. Although that sounds crazy, but since it's exciting, Yunis was immediately down to do it. Eventually, hours had passed, and Yunis was in first place with a total of 3 hours and 56 minutes, followed by Jur with 5 hours and 12 minutes. However, almost 9 hours have passed, and Lily is still nowhere to be found. But thankfully, she still managed to make it back alive and in one piece. Lily was literally sobbing in triumph, while Yunis tearfully applauded Lily's achievements. Meanwhile, Jur is accused by the 2 of playing it a little safe. But eventually, they managed to sort things out. The next day, the door obstructing them opened with a grave sound, just to reveal the path to the deepest level. As they get to the next floor, Jur wonders to himself if he is really needed at this party. It has actually been a month since they came here, and the adventure has been going extremely well. In the beginning, the girls, especially Yunis, acted all meek, so Jur managed to fight monsters on his own. However, before he could even realize it, Yunis got the hang of things and ended up taking control of the situation, and rain became the scale of light. Thanks to Yunis' magic, the group hasn't encountered a single monster lately, which should be a good thing. However, for Jur, not being able to draw his sword for several days makes him feel totally useless. Now that he mentions it, Lily starts to realize that her sanctuary barrier is not needed anymore, all that much either, since no one really gets hurt anymore. Plus, Yunis can also make something similar to it. So technically, both Lily and Jur's jobs are now getting filled in by Yunis' skills and magic alone. Yunis immediately explained that it was inevitable since he was looking to meet them both from the very bottom of her heart. As it turns out, Yunis has never been with people her age, so doing such stuff in the labyrinth like this is like a field trip for her. Going to the Grand Library is quite a normal thing for some, where young people get together and just have fun, but in Yunis' case, she was able to get in because her master had close ties to the Grand Library. It's quite rare for someone of that age to make it into the heart of a place like that. That means this is Yunis' first time to go field tripping. As the 2 went on celebrating this fact, Jur tried to tell them both that they shouldn't be keeping their guard down at all. However, after realizing that they have triple the fighting power, Jur pretty much joined in after a while. Besides, Yunis is so confident that they wouldn't really run into any problems at all since the 3 of them are technically the best in their fields after all. So for her, they are definitely the strongest party there is. So if they can't manage to make it through this labyrinth, then mankind has yet to reach the peak of their abilities. In fact, Yunis would say their current state of affairs is only natural, so it'd be more terrifying if the 3 of them were holding back. Hours later, the group decided to rest for a bit and start a campfire. While eating their dinner, Yunis can't help but express her curiosity as to why all the S-rank parties stop at the 3rd floor when they try to clear this labyrinth. Since they were all practically the best of their respective eras, Yunis feels like they should have been able to make it this far in due time at the very least. Immediately, Jur answered Yunis' question, stating that the third-floor boss is just way too strong for those S-party. Jur added that if he were to assume a thing, he probably thinks that the said creature was probably one of the greater apocryphal beasts in this place. Now this confuses Yunis since, based on rumors, the third-floor boss is just as strong as a nightmare, which is a lesser creature. So Jur immediately explains that it might be the case before its transformation. Its first phase was about as strong as that nightmare thing, but what came after that was truly horrific. During that time, Jur was so certain that if he hadn't raised his rank by slaying the toxic dragon, he definitely would not have won. Over the next hour, the group kept on talking about the same topic and teasing around. Eventually, the last door leading into the deepest floor of the hardest labyrinth would take a total of 10 days to unseal, and then 2 days after that, 2 of these 3 people would lose their lives. Meanwhile, Kraa's house back on the surface got burned down. Thankfully, she wasn't at home when the incident happened. This event somehow made Holland wonder if the knights did investigate, to which Kraa answered she doesn't really know, but stated that a holy knight was supposed to take a look for her. With this, Holland speculated that all of these events might be related to each other since last night. Godach also disappeared. All the guys got together and went looking for him, but they haven't found a single trace of him yet. So, just to be safe, Holland tells Kraa to get out of this town as soon as possible, since there have been eyewitness reports that an archmage entered the ruins, and it was the archmage of the stars, of all people. This somehow made Holland remember the future plan as a party. Although they started out as an A-rank party, but because of Godach's magic sword, they immediately advanced to S-rank in no time. So, before Kraa lives her life suffocated in her own regret, Holland tells her to run away as soon as possible. Little did he know, Arllinit is listening behind. So when asked to tell everything, Holland just went on to state that although future plan might be unrefined, they will still prevail with strategy and teamwork, making it one of the best parties there is. Since Arllinit has now heard everything, Holland decided to tell her the truth already. According to Holland, a long time ago, Godach wasn't that kind of guy. He was a good leader, and everyone had the best time when they were just a B-rank party. The main members of their current lineup joined at around that time as well. They hadn't been able to demonstrate their full power with other groups, so their party was like a rehabilitation center for guys like that. Although Godach had that kind of ability, Kraa wondered why Godach stabbed one of his allies in the back. Holland is pretty sure that Godach picking up that magic sword was the trigger, since after getting the magic sword, Godach has completely changed. Now this made the girls wonder where Godach even found that magic sword in the first place. According to Holland, it was on the middle floor of an A-rank labyrinth that's similar to the depths of the ocean called the Deep Depths. There was a place there filled with high salinity water, although Holland can't claim to know much about it, but he knows that labyrinths aren't that special at all. Generally, if one wanted to find something like a magic sword, they needed to scour prehistoric ruins. That's why back then, Holland figured out it was just something left by a dead person. In A-rank labyrinths like that, if a party is wiped out or retreats, they'll often leave behind supplies and other things. However, a magic sword would definitely be their most valuable asset, so there is no way someone would just discard it when retreating, which means Godach's magic sword must be from a dead person. Once Godach had obtained his magic sword, the only thing holding them back, which was their lack of combat strength, suddenly disappeared. They were able to get certified as an S-rank party without a hitch. But as days passed, there was always something off about Godach since then. Holland had known him for a long time, but he had people he needed to protect. So Holland submitted his resignation from the party before anything major could happen. However, Godach ended up subtly warning him not to do it since his family might end up dead. Since Holland had people who needed to be protected, he didn't even try to insist on resigning. Over the following months, no one in the group lifted a finger, even when Godach did that to Jur. Now that Holland is telling Arllinit everything, Kraa wonders if his family would still be safe, considering he already revealed the truth to Arllinit. Holland is certain that it is safe for him to talk since the Holy Knights have been hanging around their house for the last couple of days. So if Godach happens to come near, Holland doesn't imagine the Holy Knights will just stand around and watch. Now that he has already told the truth, Holland goes on to ask Arllinit why the church is taking action anyway. With such a serious tone, Arllinit goes on to reveal that the Holy Knight commanders suspect the fallen king is related to the situation at hand. However, such a thing is just a fairy tale for Holland. After all, The apocryphal scriptures from thousands of years ago definitely have to do with what's going on now. However, even Arllinit doesn't have a clear answer as to how the fallen king is involved in recent events. With all of this now unfolding, Holland somehow realized the church is simply stating that Godach is also connected with the fallen king. Although everything is still a blur, and whatever it is that Arllinit is about to say, it's just a hypothesis. But if they look closely at the timeline, the magic sword that Godach uses is most likely the fallen king's weapon. Then all of a sudden, tremors start to be felt, causing the three to immediately head outside and see what's going on. Meanwhile, back at the labyrinth, the three are now fighting a very strong instrumental apocryphal beast. Ever since they went through that second door, Jur has had the undeniable feeling that these beasts are beyond strong. The quality of the beasts has changed drastically, as they are now undaunted by Yunis' high-level magic. While Jur wouldn't go as far as to say each of them rivals that giant horse, but compared to the small fries they faced up until now, these ones are absurdly strong. If even one of these things were to break away from the labyrinth core's gravitational pull on them and make it to the outside, they would easily be able to destroy a small village on their own. As they got deeper and deeper into the labyrinth, Jur somehow realized that this whole thing was really deeper than they expected. Now that they are at the 170th floor, Jur wonders how many floors there are in total. Some speculated that there would be 200, while others think it's around 216. But no matter what it is, Lily is sure of one thing, and that is they are almost at the end. Just thinking about how the other adventurers may have found going in here so hard is almost exhausting to think about. But in all likelihood, Jur also thinks that if he'd continued this adventure accompanying future plan, he'd have never made it this far. Not to say that they are not capable as adventurers, but as far as their abilities as fighters go, there's no denying they simply wouldn't have the strength necessary to deal with multiple beasts on this floor. It's only because it's the three of them that they could go this deep into this labyrinth, making Jur think that there must be a point to all this, after all. Eventually, the group goes on to chit-chat with each other, and even plan on exchanging letters once they leave this labyrinth sooner or later. With Lily talking to Jur in such a cute tone and expression, Jur couldn't even stop himself from blushing. But aside from Lily, even Yunis was excited to send Jur letters too, making him feel a little touched. Now with more confidence and drive to finally see the outside world again, Jur and the others have decided to finally open the next door. However, what's behind it shocked them to the core. As soon as they opened the door, a bird went on to attack them with its beaming power. Lily immediately created a barrier to protect everyone, while Yunis is mesmerized at the lights now reflecting towards them as it looks exactly like the stars. Eventually, at that moment, time was rewound by 1 single second. Within his shattered body and fatting consciousness, one thing remained, and that is his soul. Towards a dazzling light which looked like it might explode, Jur simply reached out his hand as if to grab hold of that soul. In a stance he had imagined countless times before, he will now use his killer technique, called the Secret Sword Art's Moon Dream. So before death could even come, he managed to stop it on time, slicing the tiniest yet powerful monster they have encountered just yet. Although the attack was just within a second, Jur still wonders what that was all about. The only thing he remembered was the instant he entered the boss's room, the floor boss caught him off guard with just one attack. At this point, even his palms are still trembling from what happened a while ago. Then all of a sudden, Lily's panic shock snapped Jur back to reality. As he turns his head back, he is rather surprised to see that Yunis is now badly injured, but thanks to Lily's saintly magic, Yunis is still saved in the end. Despite the traumatizing experience, Yunis still looks as bubbly as before and even started joking about her near-death experience. But kidding aside, Jur was really serious about knowing what really happened earlier. With such a serious tone, Yunis revealed that she actually turned back time by 1 single second, shocking Lily. It was the primary factor in Yunis being certified as an archmage. It's a new technique she found at the very end of the stars. Although she usually has to pay more attention to the alignment of the stars and do a bunch of troublesome preparations to pull it off, she managed to do it by force this time. That said, she can only rewind a brief amount of time, but she's really glad Jur managed to beat the floor boss in that single-second window she could provide him. Aside from that, Yunis also commended Lily for her help, since if she hadn't protected her, she wouldn't have been able to recite the full incantation. On top of that, the organ she blew up as payment for the technique wouldn't also come back if it weren't for Lily's help. Yunis mentioning something about organs made Jur curious. so she decided to explain it further, stating that she used a spell in a place with no mana from the stars. So technically, at that time, the only thing she could bet on was her own life force, and the aftermath was pretty incredible. Although her insides burst just like a balloon with a resounding, Yunis finds this experience really exciting. Considering how hard their experience was a while ago, although Jur is the type who doesn't want to burden others, he was quite thankful for both Yunis's and Lily's help. But before anything else, Yunis did ask Jur from here on out if he thinks he can keep beating the floor bosses just like he did before. Now that he thinks about it, Jur himself is quite unsure of it as well. According to him, he only defeated the one just now with the effects of the awakening, to which the girls also managed to experience. Yunis herself even thinks she was able to immediately use time reversal because of the effects of the awakening right after the experience. In this world, there is a phenomenon called the experience. Though it's never been defined by anyone, people like these three have almost certainly heard of it before. Whether it's a life or death scenario, the instant one overcomes a harsh ordeal, or the moment one comes to a profound understanding, such as when a mage touches upon part of the great truth. On those occasions, a phenomenon called the experience occurs. The person's abilities rise drastically, and for a short time, they enter a state called awakening wherein they can display unthinkable feats. The single strike Jur used to change the tide of battle was thought to be a result of this phenomenon. Additionally, their long-term rise in the rank also allowed them to undergo extreme and significant growth, putting them on a completely different level than before. Of course, if they had continued to grow normally, it would still have been possible to obtain that level of power. However, because the time it would take to achieve that is drastically shortened, whether or not one has had the experience is greatly reflected in the true abilities of swordsmen and mages. With that being said, Jur eventually suggested that they should just turn back while they still have the time. He personally thinks that although he did manage to slice that monster in half within a second, he's not confident enough to think that he would still be able to do it again without the awakening. But before they jump to a conclusion, Yunis asks Lily if she has something in mind. Now that Lily's thought about it, the monster they fought earlier was not even the strongest at all, and it's just considered a middle beast. Furthermore, it's below average in terms of direct combat ability, and hearing this almost made Jur faint. Orchestras, which are the species of bird they fought earlier, have a lower order form of instrumentals, and they are also beasts that attack in flocks. The trouble with beasts that excel in group battles is the support function of the lower order members. Apparently, they were incredibly difficult to handle because each of them falls between a lesser and middle apocryphal beast in their own right, which means if one strikes down the commander, they can quickly win. At this point, Jur is having quite a strength crisis, and the girls can clearly see he is having quite a hard time. However, instead of agreeing with him to leave the labyrinth already, Yunis insisted that they should stay since she still had a lot of questions in mind. Jur did say that he managed to murder the floor boss on the 3rd floor. Although that one is considered one of the lesser beasts, it's still high in terms of power, even higher than a nightmare. In other words, the beast Jur defeated wasn't the 3rd floor boss at all. The deeper one goes into the labyrinth, the more powerful the floor bosses become, and there are no exceptions to this rule. Depending on one's capabilities, the degree of difficulty in defeating them may fluctuate. That means the mana they hold within their bodies increases with each floor. In other words, the fact that Jur encountered an opponent of that level on the 3rd floor is strange, and that's just the tip of the bizarre iceberg that Yunis is so curious about. It is common knowledge that the floor bosses cannot leave their respective boss chambers, so Yunis doesn't know if there's some kind of rule at work there, but that's just how the labyrinth is. Even the middle apocryphal beasts follow this rule. In fact, until Jur opened the door, the orchestra didn't attack. So then, Yunis wondered how an apocryphal beast even weaker than that one could jump out of the boss chamber on the 3rd floor. On top of that, it even transformed to reveal its true form. The simple hypothesis Yunis could think of is that the 3rd floor boss was an apocryphal beast that had been freed from the labyrinth's rule. Or it could be that the bonds of the labyrinths are weakening. Even if that were true, they wouldn't be able to maintain their mana outside of the labyrinth. But no matter how you think about it, one still doesn't have any idea what's going on. Long before these three were even born, there was the Apocryphal era, where the atmosphere was still full of mana. There were monsters outside of the labyrinths, and they all acted as humanity's fearsome neighbors. But for Jur, that was history from a long time ago, so there is no way something like that could ever happen again nowadays. However, for Yunis, in the worst-case scenario, it could still happen again. The reality is, they have an apocryphal beast right here in front of them, which is an atrocious creature that crawled straight out of the annals of history. So, looking at it that way, it is said the apocryphal era will be reenacted anyway. Jur couldn't seem to wrap his head around this, thinking that Yunis must be just overthinking things. However, when Jur asks Lily for her opinion, Lily mentions that there were some pages lost from the Apocrypha. It was said that a fire started in the library 700 years ago, and part of the original book went up in flames. However, it was not just original work that was affected, but even the 7 books of the first manuscript were burned as well, almost as if it was all planned. Starting from the second manuscript onwards, everything is so vague that it's hard to tell which of them is true. When Lily was a kid, she still remembered that she would read through them and imagine the possibilities, things like if the fallen king was annihilated and how the Rasti fought him. But now that she finally knows the truth, she concludes that Rasti didn't technically end the fallen king. She only sealed him in this place. As it turns out, Yunis also has the same conclusion as Lily. After exploring this labyrinth, Yunis believes that this is not a naturally occurring place, but instead it was formed from the structure that Rasti created and the outpouring of mana from the fallen king sealed within, making this place nothing but a pseudo-labyrinth. It's also possible that the description of this place was contained in the lost pages that were burned up in the fire, or perhaps someone deliberately burned them up. Although it may seem like there's a real problem with the labyrinth's bond weakening and its monsters wanting to go out, but for Lily, it's probably far more grave than that. Based on her observation, the labyrinth's seal is now about to break. Now this made Jur wonder what would actually happen if the labyrinth seal breaks. Yunis goes on to tell him everything she knows. According to her, the apocryphal beasts which are bound to the labyrinth's structure, including not just the middle beast, but even the greater beast they have yet to see, will simultaneously be released into the surface world. If that were to happen, mankind would be helplessly destroyed in no time. However, that's not all, since according to Lily, if the fallen king reawakens, the world will be flooded with mana. And if that comes to pass, then civilization as they know it will be destroyed just like prehistoric civilization was. Hearing this really made Jur panic, and just thinking that the world is about to end is all the more reason for him to turn back. For Jur, they can't simply keep such vital information to themselves, as they have to some extent get some help or get out of this labyrinth and tell everyone what they've learned. Although he is not denying that they are strong, he thinks that it also doesn't mean they are the best. So even though they've already come a long way, he still thinks that they need to swallow their pride and forget about handling this all by themselves. However, they are already running out of time as a total solar eclipse is coming. That day marks when the mana is at its densest, and Yunis thinks it's likely the same day the seal will break, or maybe the possibility of someone on the surface making the move first is also likely to happen. Based on what Yunis remembered before she came in, there's a cathedral in the city that made her always wonder why that cathedral is so strong. If it's the linchpin maintaining the seal from the surface from breaking, then someone is probably planning to destroy the cathedral in time. Although this is quite unbelievable, Lily personally thinks that it is possible. In fact, she already has someone in mind that she thinks capable of doing this, and it is none other than Godach. This is maybe the reason why he got rid of Jur, who was preemptively known as the most powerful swordsman in the country. Godach did this to ensure that their plan would proceed smoothly. But nonetheless, Yunis still thinks that it's about time for them to get going. Although her sense of time is warped, but she knows and does feel that the solar eclipse is probably going to take place 3 days from now at noon. Although she doesn't know how many floors they've still got to go, but if they don't at least save this place before then, they'll be dead in no time, along with the whole world. So even though Jur really wanted to head back to the surface, both the girls came to this labyrinth for a mission, and neither of them is leaving unless they reseal the fallen king. From this point on, there's no guarantee of survival. Though that was the case before now as well, however, if they are unfortunate enough to encounter a greater beast, Jur is certain that it won't be a life-or-death struggle, but instead it's only an inescapable death for the 3. The girls did tell him to head back already if he wanted to, since he already escorted them far enough, but thinking that he would leave behind 2 of his newly found comrades is something that Jur just couldn't do. After all, in this labyrinth, Jur had to face his own weakness of fighting properly without his glasses. So right now, Choosing between losing his life or being unable to protect the lives of his friends, Jur chose to be a man he could be proud of. Although it really is something that he is afraid to do, Jur would still rather stick around and lead these two to the deepest level of this dungeon and save the world. Although his heart is trembling due to nothing but fear of the great weight that he is about to be burdened with, since the only thing he's really good at is swinging his sword, Jur eventually joins the two in continuing this journey. At the back of his mind, he originally came to this labyrinth to conquer it, and so he would do just the thing. Eventually, the three youths continue their journey. Though their steps were not as light as they once had been, they seem to somehow be filled with hope. Now that's all for today's video. Comment labyrinth if you want to see Jur, Lily, and Yunis' journey to save the world and whether or not they will succeed in it. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. As always, thanks for watching.